Hot Singles in Your Area by Jordan Shiveley. This is a weird one. This has a 2.5 on Goodreads, which I think is the lowest rating I've ever seen for a book that I've read on Goodreads. And I do understand why. Honestly, that's probably the rating I would give this. However, this is one of those books that I think it's a love it or hate it situation. I think this book does have an audience, and that audience is weird people who want weird, messy horror books. But this one's definitely not for everyone. So this book is short and experimental and somewhat stream of consciousness, somewhat mixed media. There's a lot of interesting things going on here. It's creative. I'll give it that. And again, I think some people will like that. The plot I can do a pretty quick overview of because it doesn't matter. It kind of feels like it matters in the moment, like when you're reading it, you do want to know what happens next. But like, spoiler alert, this whole plot, I think, takes place in one day, and is just kind of weird, and the ending, I couldn't even tell you what happens in the ending. Something, evil red orb? I don't know. I don't know that the book knows either, which is like, probably my biggest critique of this, is that I don't think this author knew what they were doing. This book is just a collection of weird, horror, macabre, atmospheric ideas just all thrown together. And I think for some people that will work. And there are ideas in this that are individually rather good and that you could linger on yourself and like really flesh out. But this book as a whole, it has no foundation. There's no grounding to any of this. All of the world building is just random tiny little details that come in, mean absolutely nothing, never get mentioned again, and don't really all make sense altogether if you tried to think of them that way. This book just, I don't know, it's just ideas. This book is just vibes. It's a very vibesy book. But it does have a plot. It has two main characters, two point of view characters. One is Noah. He's a bi guy, I think, whatever. He's a janitor from Earth. We're immediately getting into some world building inconsistencies here. A big part of this book is Noah gets a supernatural job and has to deal with like these supernatural beings, and it freaks him out and he's having a hard time doing it. But at the beginning of the novel, he's a janitor who works at like a train station or a subway or something, and he like cleans up blood and teeth on the night shift all the time. And so he's clearly already doing some kind of supernatural job. And I don't know like where he's from. There's like different cities, dimensions, realms here. I don't know. I don't think the book knows. But he is a human, seemingly Earth, and he makes Earthian references. There's references to like Frasier, Alex Trebek, you know, earthly contemporary things. But he also is clearly doing some sort of supernatural janitorial job. And so like there must be bleed over between the realms, or Earth is supernatural. But if Earth is supernatural and he grew up in this weird environment, then why would he be scared of the weird stuff that happens later? I don't know. I don't think the book knows. No one knows. But he quits his terrible job as a night janitor, and he gets hired. He sees a classified ad for a job at a newspaper, selling ad space at this newspaper. The less experience, the better. Red flag, but you know, whatever. He needs the job, he's poor. They hire him immediately, and his plot is he's been tasked to go speak to this woman about her ad space that she usually buys in the newspaper. But she's a weird, creepy, supernatural being that almost kills him, and he's struggling to talk to her, or like find her and live. And basically he just has to gain the confidence to do this weird supernatural job because he needs the money. And that's his plot. He needs to impress this weird like handyman who works around the building, who ends up being his weird supernatural love interest. It's like an older gay man, if you're into that. And then his boss, Linda, who is a character who becomes the connecting tissue between these two characters. The other character is a nun named Malakia, who lives in the City of Silence. What is that? Who knows? She is a human. She was not born in the City of Silence, but she is there now, and she is also the only person there now. She wakes up one day, and everyone is gone, and she's forgotten a lot of things, and she's forgotten people. The only person she remembers is Bene, who is a skeleton. She has sex with a skeleton in this book. That's a good scene. That's the best scene in the book, is the lesbian skeleton sex scene. Pretty interesting. And the skeleton is like some sort of higher up goddess, god, being, deity in their weird nun cult. It kind of has Lock Tomb vibes. It's really not Lock Tomb vibes, but like Harrow Hark vibes. I feel like Harrow Hark would appreciate the skeleton sex scene. And since that book is technically in the future, I like to imagine that Harrow Hark has a copy of this book in her weird forbidden library on the ninth house, and she's like secretly reading the skeleton smut. Because Malakia is also a necromancer, like a bone witch. It feels kind of Harrow Harky, and that's probably why I liked it, and I liked her story. Even though she doesn't really fucking do anything, she wakes up and everyone's gone, and she's like, what's going on? And she ends up finding like this eldritch god tree, ask what the fuck is going on. Then she meets Linda, who's like a non-binary demonic entity with some sort of ulterior motive. I don't know. Again, the red orb. I don't know. I don't know. The book knows. And she's trying to restore the City of Silence. And she also runs into newspaper boy Noah. I don't know. They come together at the end. Again, the ending's not incredibly clear about what happens, so I can't spoil it for you. But again, you don't read this for the plot, because the plot isn't there. Like, again, while you're reading it, you do think there's going to be a plot, but spoiler alert, not really. Or, like, kind of, but it doesn't have a satisfying resolution, so, like, don't read this for the plot. Like, I don't think that's the point. I think the point is the weird collection of cool ideas. And the world building, even though it's not building, because it's like having a bunch of fucking Legos. And they're all really pretty, but they're all from completely different sets, and literally none of the pieces are put together, and there's no fucking instructions because these pieces are from different sets and they don't fucking go together. But you could pick them up individually and go like, wow, that's a pretty shade of green. Or like whatever. So we just get like all of these names. I really liked the names of, I don't know, the religious stuff, all of the religious orders. There's like probably like 25 different religious sects just name dropped for no reason. We have no idea what these people do, what they're about, how long they've been, what their history. Again, none of these are concrete ideas. They're just like thrown in there. And I guarantee you the author does not know what any of these things are. They just came up with a phrase that sounded cool and they put it in there. And it does sound cool. But like that is the only gimmick. Like after a point you're like, okay, that's a cool name for a thing. Or like that's a cool like Bible verse. It's not a Bible. Whatever. Religious chant hymn. But like it doesn't mean anything. And the novelty of all of the cool names kind of wears off after a while. It's kind of funny at first, but again, it's so shallow that like what's the point? And some people might not want a point. Some people might really enjoy just having those things and taking the time to like try to piece it together themselves, and maybe that's the fun for them. But for me, I wanted a point, and I know that there wasn't one. So it's just like if the author didn't even care enough about these things to like give them any meaning, like why would I care about them after a while? You know what I mean? But to each their own. The mixed media portions of this also I have mixed feelings on, pun intended. So pretty early on, like we get a chapter of Noah, and then we get a bunch of newspaper clippings that are representations of the printed matter, which is the newspaper where he works. And these are really cool, actually. It literally looks like a newspaper. You have all of these little columns. They're all fucking weird and like meaningless, sort of. Or they do have meaning, but they're like tiny little stories and like little tweets. That's what I would call this book. Or like this section of the book. It's like tweet length creepypastas, and they're actually pretty good. And I think they're also the most well written parts of this novel. And some of them are just one little square, and some of them it'll be like a person taking out multiple spaces in an ad or in multiple papers to like continue on a little story, and you get like short microfiction within this greater novel. And those are also really good. But like, what is the point? Again, there's no depth, and it doesn't mean anything to the story as a whole. It has nothing to do with our main characters here. It's just like a cool little microfiction horror story. Which again, cool, and really well written, and like really macabre, and even the ones that like don't have a plot, the word choice and the descriptions and like the adjectives are so interesting and weird that you're like, yeah, I kind of want to know more about that. Like, I kind of want to ruminate on that and think about it. Or like, what a cool visual, you know? But like, what is it doing in this novel? Not a lot, except just being there and being cool, which is like a lot of this novel. Again, it's vibes. But I did like those. However, I said we get a chapter of Noah, and then we get a bunch of these. And the first couple are like, wow, this is cool. I'm like interested in this newspaper, and I'm learning about like what Noah's doing and what he's working with. And then you get more of them, and more of them, and more newspapers, and more newspapers. And you're like, oh, I'd like to go back to the novel that I'm reading. Because at this point in the novel, again, you think there's going to be a plot, and like you want to know Noah's story, and like what's he going to do, and how's this job going to be. And like this inclusion of this many newspaper clippings all at once really stunts the pace, because you have to go through them like slowly. I had to like zoom in, I had the ebook, and like, I don't know, they're like kind of long to read, and it really breaks up the flow. And with the first few, you're like, wow, this is cool, and I like that it's different and interesting, and I'm getting to see Noah's world. And then at some point you're like, where's the book? I want to read the book that I want to read. And then we get a couple more chapters, and then we get a couple more clippings, and then we never get any clippings ever again, which is like sad. Maybe there are a couple, but like it's top heavy. Like you get a lot of them immediately, and it's too many of them, and then they go away, and you're like, wow, I wish we had some later in the book, because those are really interesting little stories, and like they're fun. And so I think I would have enjoyed them more if they had just been sporadically placed throughout the book, a couple at a time. And that's the main mixed media part of this. The ending, there's like some emails at the ending, which is kind of funny, about Linda. Those are pretty good, and a cute way to end this. And then the lesbian skeleton sex scene is like, I don't know if it's like a dream sequence, but the text is all like sectioned off, and around it just says darkness. I have a graphic, whatever. So it is kind of experimental, but it's not the most experimental book you've ever seen in your entire life. But it does do that. But I think it could have done that better. I think the pacing of it could have been better. I think the dissemination of those different things could have broken up the flow of the novel in a more interesting way, or in a more readable way. And they felt very different to the novel, not just in that they were little short stories about things that had nothing to do with our characters, but in the actual voice of the writing. Again, those were the best written parts of this book. And a lot of parts of this book, in the actual book part, the narrative, feel like stream of consciousness writing. Again, I don't think this author planned a lot of things. They were going on vibes and just like making shit up and writing random ideas down. And you can kind of feel that in the writing style. At first I thought it was a character thing. Like Noah, he's just like a younger guy. He needs a job. He's just a poor dude, you know? He's just like a chill bro. And so it kind of makes sense that he's in this stream of consciousness, present tense, just trying to survive, making dumb little dude jokes in his head. That tone really fit him. And at first, Malakia has a different tone of voice, and she feels more serious, and she feels like a nun who has like all this structure and these religious doctrines in her head, and like these mottos she sort of lives by. But every once in a while, in Malakia's point of view, she'll just make a dumb joke that feels exactly like a dumb dude bro joke that Noah would have made. And so the writing feels off. Like, it feels like the author's hand is showing. It doesn't feel like Malakia would make that joke. It feels like Noah would make that joke. But even in doing that, it made it feel like actually just the author is the person who makes that joke. And maybe Noah wouldn't even make them retroactively. You can just tell that, like, the author wanted to say something funny there. And so the voices get muddled. Again, I don't think this was pristine and refined or, like, perfectly edited. I would have done something different. I would have tried to distinguish between the voices better. And again, I think the author tried to do that at the very start. But sometimes just, like, gave up trying. Didn't care. So the voices blend. And some of Malakia's scenes are well written on a prose level. Again, she feels like a more serious character at times. And you can see that this author is talented. Like, again, those newspaper sections and that microfiction is really good. And I think that's because they just put the effort in, and they wanted to tell a specific little story, or they had a very specific idea, and they knew they had to execute it well because they're in this limited space of a newspaper clipping, whereas in the novel you could just word vomit and go on forever. It could be as long as you want. I know because I write that way a lot, and it's not my best work. So the moments where the author's actually trying are really good. And then there's moments where the author isn't trying, and sometimes those are funny, or cheeky or have an interest of their own. There's some charm to them, but it also kind of ends up feeling just lazy and unrefined. Another weird mixed media thing that I didn't really care, but I could see some people hating this. There are footnotes in this book, but they're not like actual footnotes for the most part that you would see in like a research paper or something. And they're also not on the bottom of the page, or at least they weren't for me in the ebook. It was just a hyperlink that took you to the very back of the book with a list of all the footnotes. And it would just always hyperlink to some dumbass fucking joke. And again, sometimes funny, or sometimes it's just like a reference to another cool name. Or like, this was initially said by this person in this time period in this book. And it's supposed to sound like it's referencing some sort of research paper or something, but it's like a dumb joke with a funny name, or an interesting name, or a cool name, or like whatever. And this also basically disappears in the back half of the novel. Like, these footnotes are very front-loaded. And then the author just kind of starts including those like stupid parentheticals that really add nothing from the footnotes, just like in the text, which is fine. And like really makes more sense and is like more readable because you don't have to flip to the back of the book and then come back. That would be really annoying in a physical book, because again, in the ebook I could just click the hyperlink and go back, then I'd have to click to the back page, but whatever. But in a physical book, if I had to like flip through every single time, I'd be a little bit annoyed, especially when it's not actually fucking relevant information, you know what I mean? But also maybe someone likes that. I could see someone liking that. I could see more people hating it though. But again, it dies down. Just commit to the footnotes. And again, it's not like it's referencing actual information you need, and it's like, oh, you've learned that already, so I don't need to keep doing footnotes. It's just dumb jokes. Just make footnotes throughout the whole thing. All the time. Chapter lengths also start to differ. The longer this book goes on, the chapters get really, really short. I don't know why. They're not really long in the beginning. They're actually pretty short chapters, actually. Like, in terms of what you'd think of a chapter of a book, these are pretty short, or at most standard, and then they just like keep getting shorter and shorter. I don't think there's a reason for that. I don't know, the author was just going scene to scene, jumping back and forth between Noah and Malakia, and again, so that makes it really fast-paced, which again is a big difference from the start of the book, where you have all those newspaper clippings that bring it to a fucking halt. So it's weird. This is a weird book, and I don't think it was the best version of what it wanted to be. And I also don't think even the best version of this book isn't for everyone. But I also think the mess of it might be charming to some people. People are weird. People like different things. I want a real refined book. This is not that book. And maybe it didn't want to be. Maybe it wants to be messy like this. I still think it could have been cleaned up in some areas to really highlight the strength of the writing, and also like highlight the experimentation. I don't know. If it's clean, then the messy parts work and stand out even more. But again, just like the whole thing was kind of messy. But maybe someone likes that. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. I don't regret reading this. I gave this like 3 stars. I liked parts of it. It probably is like a 2.5 star book, to be honest. So it actually has a valid Goodreads rating, maybe. But it is really low for a Goodreads rating, which is kind of sad, because it's not, like, a terrible book. It's not a great book, but I think it could be, like, a cult classic, a beloved weirdo cult book. Like, this has an audience. I don't know if that was me necessarily, but again, I did still enjoy parts of it. And it's short, so you don't feel like you're wasting all this time. It's like a good weird read. If you want a weird book, this fits the bill better than a lot of other books. What's the point? I don't know. I don't know if it's got any deep themes, deep messages, if it's really trying to say anything. Maybe something about capitalism, because the whole point of the book is Noah just needs this job, and he's gonna do it, even if it puts his life in danger. He's gonna do it so that he can get paid. And that's kind of his story. Maybe that does say something. But I do also think this author has talent. This author's creative. There's some ideas here. There's some ideas. It's for someone. You might like this. Maybe. You might hate it as well. But if you think you might hate this book, maybe just don't read it. And if you think you might love it, maybe give it a shot. I think it's worth a try if you're feeling adventurous.